Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hope you had a good weekend. Boy, I hope you're keeping safe. I'm hoping you're doing your social distancing. Here in southern Oklahoma, we're still having relatively few infections of the COVID. But my goodness gracious, and down in Texas and in Arkansas and in different locales, in the states surrounding us, the cases are just raging. Thankfully, so far, very few mortalities, and so I suppose that has to do with the improvement of treatments that is happening. But please be safe. Please continue in prayer as we progress along. Then hopefully, they're still talking about hopefully a vaccine by fall. We're certainly hopeful for that. I got to tell you, I'm kind of a loner in a lot of ways. I'm normally really just fine if I've got any time off. I'm perfectly fine being out in my garage by myself, working on an old car. And I'm perfectly fine being here in my offices, studying, researching, praying, contemplating, and what have you. But after a while, it kind of gets a little bit old, doesn't it, with most of us? So, please be safe. Well, we are continuing our examination of the critical text of Matthew 24 and verse 36, where Jesus said, "But of that day and hour knows no man." And in conflating that with Mark chapter 13, he said, "No, not the angels, not the Son, but the Father only." Okay, so Jesus said, "No man knows the day or the hour." Well, as I've shared with you, that very language, is the language of the Jewish feast days. As I've been sharing with you right along over the last several videos, to overlook or to ignore the language that is found in the Olivet Discourse, that is taken directly from Jewish feast days, is to divorce ourselves from the entire culture, from the entire thought world of those first century Jews. Is that even good hermeneutic? How can we justify, divorcing ourselves from their thought world and claim that we understand what they were saying? I mean, it just doesn't even make good nonsense, as I sometimes like to say. So, the feast referred to in Matthew 24:36 is Rosh HaShanah. It was the Feast of the New Moon. It was the Feast of Trumpets. It was the Feast of Judgment. As I've shared with you, about 12 different names were given to Rosh HaShanah. We have focused on the feast and the language of no man knows the day or the hour in regard to and in relationship with the sounding of the trumpet for the time of the judgment. Don't forget, folks, the period of time, the 4 months between Pentecost and Rosh Hashanah, was called in ancient times the time of waiting for the judgment. I wonder if that's just simply coincidental. Because you see, they believed during the time of the Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, and especially on Yom Kippur, the books were opened, in which were the names of all mankind. There were those whose deeds were good. There were those whose deeds were evil. There were those whose deeds were yet undetermined. These are the books. Sound like Revelation chapter 20? It should. Anyway, the names of all men were found written in the books. So Rosh Hashanah proclaimed the coming of the judgment and the judgment of those written in the books. Throughout the New Testament, after the day of Pentecost, we find constant references to the coming day of judgment, and we find constant references to the coming day of judgment at the time of the sounding of the trumpet. Oh, Rosh HaShanah was called the last trumpet. But Paul said the resurrection would be at the last trumpet, which would be at the time of the harvest, which is Sukkot. It would be at the time of the coming of the Lord, which is Yom Kippur. And as promised, I want now for us to focus on the last thing the Bible has to say about the sounding of the trumpet. And that's found in Revelation chapter 10 and 11. In Revelation chapter 10, John in verse 5 says, "The angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised up his hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are in it, the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and the things that are in it, that there should be delay no longer." Now listen folks, this language is taken absolutely directly, as virtually all scholars agree, taken directly from Daniel chapter 12 and verse 6. Well, what's the significance of that? Well, Daniel chapter 12 foretold the time of the Great Tribulation. It foretold the time of the resurrection, foretold the time of the end, foretold the time of the kingdom. And Daniel chapter 12 and verse 6, one angel asks another, "When shall these things be fulfilled?" Now, you know, it's absolutely incredible that we have some who claim to be former preterists, and they now take the position that verse 1 refers to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, but verse 2 refers to the end of time, and thus they insert a so far 2,500-year gap into the period at the end of verse 1. And they claim that's some kind of solid hermeneutic. They claim that's exegesis. No, it's not, and it is an abuse of the text. It's a perversion of the text. One angel asked another, "When shall these things?" Now listen to me, not some of these things, not one or two of these things, but when shall these things be? And the other angel lifted his hands to heaven. He stood on the land, he stood on the sea, and he lifted his hands to the God of heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever. Yeah, that's Revelation 10:6. That it shall be for a time, times and a half time. And listen to this carefully. Catch the power of this. When the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all of these things. Now look, not some, not one, not a few, all of these things will be fulfilled when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. Now, with that background of Revelation chapter 10, notice verse 7. In the days of the sounding of the seventh angel, when he's about to sound, seventh angel is going to sound what? The seventh trumpet, the last trumpet, which is for the resurrection. So in the days of the sounding of the seventh angel, the seventh trumpet, when he is about to sound, the mystery of God would be finished as he declared to his servants, the prophets. The mystery of God would be finished in the days of the sounding of the seventh trumpet. The seventh trumpet is the last trumpet of Rosh HaShanah. Do we have any other information about the sounding of the seventh trumpet? Well, let's see. Revelation chapter 11, verse 15. Then the seventh angel, well, let's see. The seventh angel is going to sound the seventh trumpet, which is the last trumpet, which is the time of Rosh HaShanah, which is the time of the judgment, which is the time of the resurrection. Then the seventh angel sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders who sat before God and before his throne fell down on their faces and worshiped God, saying, we give you thanks, O Lord God Almighty, the one who was, one who is, and who was, and who is to come, because you have taken your great power and reigned. The nations were angry, and your wrath has come, and the time of the dead that they should be judged, and that you should reward your servants, the prophets, and your saints. Wait a minute. The sounding of the seventh trumpet, the time of judgment. The sounding of the seventh trumpet, the time of the dead that they should be judged. Now, when would this take place? Well, let's see. It would be at the time of the judgment and the destruction of the city where the Lord was crucified. Revelation 11, verse 8. Now, some people like to talk about Revelation 11, 1 and following, being an interlude. Okay, that's fine. Doesn't matter. How can anyone claim to be doing a serious job of exegesis and honor the text and context to say, well, okay, Revelation 11:8 may refer to AD 70, may or may not, because after all, some claim that Jerusalem in Revelation is now some kind of a composite city. It's not one single city, it's a composite city. Babylon is not Jerusalem under the imagery of Babylon. It may include that, but it's far more than that, for which there is not a scintilla or a keystroke or a jot or a tittle of support of that. That is a contrived, invented theology. No justification. But here's the point. What basis is there for inserting, let's just say it's admitted that verse 8, oh yeah, it's AD 70, but, verse 15 and following, that's the end of time. So once again, they're inserting so far a 2,000-year gap into the text where there is not one scintilla of evidence in support of such a gap. Now, what's absolutely fascinating and revealing, I love the comments by Gregory Beale commenting on Revelation chapter 14 and the impending time of the judgment of Babylon. Babylon has fallen. The hour of her judgment has come. Well, Gregory Beale points out what's happening here is that the Father, who knew the day and the hour, was revealing to Jesus, his Son, that the time had arrived. Oh, unfortunately, Gregory Beale projects that into our future. No, the hour of his judgment, Rosh HaShanah, has come. And so the book opens with and closes with, and has in the middle these constant statements of the imminent judgment. And the imminent judgment of the city where the Lord was crucified, the imminent judgment and resurrection, the rewarding of the prophets, which Daniel posited at the time when the power of the holy people would be completely shattered, and Revelation posits that at the judgment of the city where the Lord was crucified. And so, I suggest to you that when we put Matthew 24:36 in its proper festal context, when we put it within the context of Revelation, that, as Gregory Beale says, the Father who knew the time was revealing to the Son. And what was he revealing to the Son? Well, the hour of Babylon's judgment has come. Not 2,000 years away, the hour of his judgment has come. I'm sorry, folks, there is no way to properly either lexically or exegetically or hermeneutically or honestly, claim that all of these time references are only, quote, so-called time references. That really, truly is utterly ridiculous. All of this puts Matthew 24:36 in a totally different light, does it not? It means that Matthew 24:36 was not a break in the subject. It was not a dichotomy or a divorcing of verse 36 and following from the previous discussion of the fall of Jerusalem and the end of the age in AD 70. It means that Jesus was saying, even if it seems somewhat cryptically to us today, it means that Jesus was telling his apostles that coming in judgment, that end of the age, was to be at one of the Jewish feast days. They wouldn't know which one. I mean, after all, 40 years would pass, give or take. But they would know it would be during the feast days. And it's not just simply coincidental, ladies and gentlemen, that Jerusalem was besieged and destroyed during Israel's festal calendar. Well, that's all we have for today. Hey, listen, be watching. July 9th through the 11th is coming up. Preterist Pilgrim Weekend, the video seminar. Okay? There is a link on YouTube. Just look it up, Preterist Pilgrim Weekend 2020. And on Thursday, July the 9th, you'll be able to click on that and watch the videos. Our speakers have all filmed their presentations. Some have done PowerPoint presentations. And look, this is different because of COVID, but we are glad to bring you Preterist Pilgrim Weekend 2020 on YouTube, totally free of charge. We could use your financial aid, okay, if you are so mind, if you feel like you can help us. But if you can't, it's still free. All right. Thanks so much for joining me on this morning's Morning Musings. You have a fantastic week. I will see you on the flip side.